The queen of creative entrepreneurs is now on YouTube, which begs the question, should you be too if you want your business to be successful this year? I was curious, why exactly did Jenna Kutcher decide to get on YouTube after having hosted one of the most successful podcasts since 2016? She also has 1 million followers on Instagram, so you could argue she doesn't need to be on YouTube, but suddenly she is. Which raises the question, does she know something that you don't? Is long-form video on YouTube necessary to not getting left behind in business? Maybe you also wish you had been around on Instagram in 2015 when real growth was still possible. So the question is YouTube the next big opportunity for growth for creative entrepreneurs? While YouTube has been around since 2005, there are actually very, very few creative entrepreneurs on it. I could give you the names of hundreds of creative entrepreneurs who are active on Instagram, but maybe like 10 which are consistently posting on YouTube. So let's start by hearing from Jenna directly to see exactly what's up with her new decision. In her 2024 strategy video, she said this.
We're also exploring YouTube, so if you like to watch the podcast, you can now go watch it on YouTube. We're experimenting with these different areas. So one of the things that we're really committed to next year, which isn't super shiny, isn't super exciting, is that we're focusing on the things that people are not going to see, but you will feel and experience. So things like search engine optimization, exploring what YouTube could look like for the brand, getting new branding done across the board, continuing to work with our measurement team. So we are really just kind of looking at like, how do we just make everything like 1% better?
So okay, she's trying YouTube, but why is she adding something new for someone who is very anti-complicated business? She also noted in her blog post on the top 5 marketing predictions for 2024, a trend in the rise of long-form content consumption. She said, with the shifts in the economy, more entrepreneurs will be relying on long-form content to learn skills and strategies. Podcasting, blogging, and YouTube will be the main platforms for this type of content. By focusing on long-form content, you can provide comprehensive answers and build a library of valuable resources for your audience. But I think the bigger question is one for you. If you're not doing any of these platforms right now, or maybe you're doing a few but aren't sure if you've made the right choice with the platform you have chosen, then which platform should you choose? I asked on my YouTube community feed which platforms you're considering for the new year. 46% of you said YouTube, 25% of you said blog, and 22% said Instagram. But which is the right choice? If there's one thing you can learn from Jenna's success is that she's actually pretty deliberate and slow in her business. She started blogging in 2011, and blogging was her only long-form content platform until 2016. She spent basically 5 years just doing one long-form platform. She also worked on her Instagram with 1,000 followers in 2014 to 1 million followers 10 years later. And in 2016, she added podcasting, and so from 2016 to 2023, she basically just did blog, Instagram, podcast. So she spends literally years building up one new content platform before she adds another. And that's one of the keys to her success. Consistency and staying in her lane on that platform that she's chosen until she's mastered it. So let's compare the 3 platforms which you say you're most considering in the new year. YouTube versus blog versus Instagram. We're gonna compare these on the following to help you pick the right one. Okay, so let's compare the 3 platforms that you say you're most considering for the new year. That is YouTube, Instagram, and blog. And let's just ignore the fact for a second that my Sharpie's dying because I live in Switzerland, there's no Amazon, and I need to go to an actual store, and that's clearly gonna take like 3 weeks to get around to doing. Okay, and we're gonna compare these on the following criteria. So first, competition, searchability, ability to get found like Google-wise, discoverability, that means like viral ability, like the platform just promotes you basically. Relationship building with your audience, the ease or not ease of creating the content, analytics, how much data you can get to figure out what to do better in the future, and then actual growth potential. And then in terms of our scoring system, I'm gonna rank all of these out of 10. So, competition on YouTube. Spoke about this before. really not in the creative entrepreneurial space, very few people on it. I think the fact that Vanessa Lau did blow up on YouTube a couple of years ago shows that there is a huge demand, but not a lot of supply happening on YouTube for creative entrepreneurs. So I'm gonna give it a 10. Instagram, I don't think it would come as a surprise to anyone, is very saturated in the creative entrepreneurial space. Basically every single creative entrepreneur is on Instagram, which you could argue is good because, you know, your audience is there, but also downside, you're competing against more people in that location. So I'm gonna give this a 4. In terms of blog, that is a very, let's say, easy to get into type of content creation. We'll talk about difficulty of creating it in a second, but because it's so easy, it also is fairly common for people to have a blog. Oftentimes people will have something like a podcast as well, and then they'll do the show notes on the blog. So in terms of availability of blogs in the creative entrepreneurial space, also a lot of people doing it. So competition, I would say, is pretty high for this one. So we're also gonna give this a 4. Now, search potential. This is interesting, and this is actually the reason that I went from just blogging to also adding YouTube. So what I was noticing, I teach people how to be website designers, and so I would create a lot of tutorials on stuff like Squarespace. And that's when I realized that when I would search certain things for related to Squarespace, there was a lot of not just blog posts coming up, but suddenly a lot of YouTube videos appearing. And I realized, depending on the industry, it is more convenient to watch a video on something than to read a blog post on something. So YouTube videos are more and more often coming up in the search results. And so I don't think it's as good as a blog. I still think blog being all text-based is better. So I'm gonna give blog a 10 and I'll give YouTube maybe like a 7. Now, in terms of Instagram, I pretty much have never seen an Instagram post, reel, anything come up when you Google and are trying to find some sort of how-to or educational resource. Even though you might have posted something amazing on Instagram, like how to photograph the perfect senior session, chances it's gonna come up in the Google search results is pretty much none, so it's gonna get a 0. Next, let's talk discoverability. So this is basically the potential of the platform itself just showing your content. This is something different than search. Search is, I go into the search results, I type something, and then your content appears. Whereas discoverability is really like TikTok is amazing for this. It literally just, the algorithm is just showing popular viral content. And so your potential to go viral, I think, is bigger with any platform that has better discoverability. When it comes to Instagram, Instagram does this not as well as TikTok, but better than for sure a blog. A blog, what are the chances that, I mean, I just don't think it's gonna happen. So I'm actually gonna give blog a 0 on discoverability. On Instagram, this is the difficulty with Instagram, which I think is a lot of the reason why a lot of creative entrepreneurs are getting tired of it, is it feels really difficult to be found on Instagram. Reels definitely give you a potential for doing this, and Reels is really your best discoverability option on Instagram these days. But again, something like TikTok is better. It feels very difficult for a lot of people to get found on there. So I'll give it maybe a 7 for that. And then on YouTube, this is actually the thing which surprised me the most when it came to getting on the platform, and something which I had to totally change in my brain from having written on a blog and just being a blogger before to doing blog and YouTube. And that was the fact that 70% of views on YouTube come from something like you just see when you're scrolling through the home feed, or the suggested videos or the up next videos on the right-hand side of the page. And only 30% of views on YouTube are actually coming from you searching something in the search bar and then content appearing that way. So actually your best way to grow on YouTube isn't necessarily to create search-based content. That's an option, you can create that content, but you're probably actually better off to try to go for discoverability. And that's making your videos a little bit sexy, giving it a really like kind of intriguing title and thumbnail in order to get found. So for discoverability on YouTube, actually better than you might imagine. So I'm also gonna give this a 7 and put it equal with Instagram. Next, relationship building. So this is your ability to, be a real human to your audience. If you want to be a personal brand, then, having some personality in there is helpful. Having a relationship, sharing things which are not just how-to tutorial content again and again and again is beneficial. In terms of the platforms which are best for doing that, blog, let's be real, is probably the worst. It is possible you can, add a little bit of your life and personality into there, but it's written format. It doesn't feel as real, and you're less so like in people's lives, let's say. Whereas I would say for YouTube and Instagram, I do think it's a lot more possible because it's just video content. It automatically gives you a better opportunity to connect with your audience. So I would say that probably those two are kind of even for me. The thing which actually might even give Instagram the edge is the fact that you can bring people with you in your like very everyday life. And it's very like quick short clips and stories, for example, or reels, and that's good. Whereas with YouTube, it's actually a bit, we're gonna come to this again, harder to produce content. So you're probably a little bit, maybe less sharing less of your life than you would on Instagram. So I would say probably our best relationship builder is probably Instagram, followed closely by YouTube. And they're both doing obviously significantly better than a blog because of the fact that it's video content. I feel like if you were considering podcasts would be somewhere in between like written content and video content, basically, because you're just doing audio. Okay, next up is creation. So when it comes to creating YouTube videos, I've mentioned this a few times, it is complicated. It took me a long time to figure out lighting and audio and having a space that was good for making YouTube videos. And so that is difficult. Also the fact that if you're like me, you also want to, not look like you do on an everyday day of work. I do not normally look like this on a regular day of work. And so yeah, creation on YouTube, very challenging. Just a lot that goes into it. Instagram, I would argue, again, it's more like little snippets here and there, so probably a bit easier to produce. Still not, the easiest, not as easy as a blog. A blog, all I had to do when I was blogging was like open my laptop, didn't matter what time of day it was or anything. I could just crack open the laptop, start typing, produce something in like an hour or two. Creating a YouTube video can take me half a day to a day these days. Instagrams, I know if you're creating reels, I've never actually created one, but people always say that it takes them way longer than you would expect to create a 30-second reel. It could take them like an hour. So let's say, and then also equipment. Actually, let's talk about that too. Blog, you basically just need a laptop and an idea. Instagram, idea, phone, maybe a light. YouTube, camera, a few lights, bigger space as well, I would say. If you want to really do it, well. So let's put creation. YouTube's gonna get a 0. Okay, so for creation, we have YouTube 0, Instagram 5, and blog a 10. Next, let's move on to analytics. Might not sound the sexiest thing in the world, but to be honest, it was only once I got onto YouTube that I realized the insanity that is YouTube analytics and just how powerful that is. Let me give you an example so this will make sense to you. So I was watching back one of my videos, and in a YouTube video, you can watch in the back end the retention on a video. So it is the percentage of people who drop off in your video. The interesting thing about it was that you can see when there's like a spike of interest in something in a YouTube video. And so I went back and I noticed like, what is the spike of interest? What exactly was I talking about at that point? I was talking about batch working in that video when it had the little spike of interest. So that let me know, okay, my people are very interested to learn more about batch working. I should create more content on that. When I had a blog, I could see what the most popular blog posts were, but I couldn't get very specific into the analytics. And so yeah, blog, okay for analytics, you know what the most popular pages are on your blog, but beyond that, not much. YouTube, it will blow your mind once you get into the analytics, like the extent of them is bananas. Instagram, okay, not great, so let's do this. Okay, next, let's talk about growth. So there was a very interesting YouTube video which I just watched. I will link it above for you. It was from a lovely lady named Modern Millie, and she was talking about the top 50 creators on Forbes top creator list and where they had grown their platforms and their audience and their following and where they were most active now. And the most interesting thing that I noticed in that video was that she said that all of the people who were on Instagram, and that was their main content platform, they didn't grow on Instagram. They actually grew on other platforms and then sort of like brought that audience over to Instagram, but that wasn't the place they grew in the first place. And so from that gives me the feeling that growing on Instagram, and again, if you're on Instagram, you're probably feeling this, growing feels very difficult on there. So that's not fabulous. So honestly, I'm gonna give Instagram like a 2 for growth. Now, in terms of blog, growing on a blog, having done it for literally years, you will get like organic, slow growth. As you write things that Google wants to put in their search results, you will slowly but surely build your traffic. And it is a pretty steady, slow growth on a blog. On YouTube, however, there is a lot more, again, discoverability options, and therefore also more, let's say, viral growth. It's not viral like TikTok is or anything, but it's definitely better than the other two, I would say. Blog is gonna get a 5 for me here, and YouTube will get an 8 for me in terms of growth. Ooh, there's one point actually which I forgot to mention on the topic of discoverability and YouTube, and that is this. And this is pretty unique to the platform and not that usual, which is really cool. So the way that YouTube works is it suggests similar content. So for example, if Jenna Kutcher is growing on YouTube and your audience that you want to have is basically the same audience as who Jenna has, when Jenna posts videos, YouTube needs other content to suggest and recommend after her videos or beside her videos. So this is obviously a big opportunity. If someone like Jenna or anyone else who is on YouTube has your audience, then perfect. That's also a good sign that discoverability-wise, YouTube will be a really great thing for you. So you know what? I might even make that an 8 as opposed to a 7. Okay, math time, give me a second. Okay, final results are in. YouTube came in with 51 points, Instagram with 31 points, and blog with 32 points. And it looks like the Sharpie has officially called it quits. To be honest, rankings aside though, another factor should be how much that platform really aligns with you and your strengths. Some of us are better suited to speaking in front of a lot of people on video or in person, and others of us just are not. I had so many of my web designer students ask me what marketing strategy they should choose to get clients, and I actually ended up creating a quiz so they could get the answer quickly that way. If you want it, head to paigebrenton.com/quiz to learn which client finding method matches your personality type. To be honest, the 3 platforms that we've discussed here are just actually the tip of the iceberg in terms of marketing options. And it could be that actually none of these that we've discussed are right for you, but maybe one of the ones in the quiz is the right option for you. Again, I'll put the quiz link in the description for you below. Now, no matter which platform you choose, if you're smart like Jenna, you're not just going to create content, you're gonna create content that leads to your email list. Jenna always says that her email list is where she actually drives profits and results in her business, and I personally have to agree. It's the same for my business. So watch this video next to steal my list building strategy for getting 48,000 email subscribers.